Picture this: a grand ballroom awash in glittering chandeliers, tuxedos and diamonds. A pregnant woman, trying her best to wear a brave smile, stands at the corner of the room as whispers swirl around her like a ravenous tide. Suddenly the mistress arrives, slim, stunning, radiating confidence, and zeroes in on her target. She offers a snide remark loud enough for all to hear, mocking the wife's blossoming belly and precarious situation. Gasps fill the air. Everyone expects the millionaire husband to defend his wife. Instead, silence reigns. Until the pregnant wife makes a move no one saw coming. In the blink of an eye, the entire room will witness one of the most shocking public downfalls anyone has ever seen. 4 years before that electrifying charity gala, the wealthy entrepreneur Joseph Joe Chadwick, heir to the Chadwick real estate empire, married Charlotte Rivers in an exclusive ceremony at St. Ignatius Church in New York City. Joe, known for his quiet demeanor and regal taste, took over the reins of Chadwick Realty upon his father's passing. Charlotte, once a rising interior designer from Boston, was swept up into a fairy tale romance when she accepted Joe's proposal. The wedding, rumored to have cost nearly $2 million, was the talk of the season. No expense was spared. The bride's gown was custom-made in Paris. The guest list included famed personalities like Elon Musk, Oprah Winfrey, and Bernard Arnault. All acquaintances of Joe's late father, and the media coverage was relentless. Charlotte's hesitant smiles in the wedding photographs were explained away as bridal nerves. Yet a few close friends worried something might not be quite right. After all, Charlotte had given up her bustling design career in Boston to relocate to the high-pressure world of Manhattan society in order to stand by Joe's side. In private, they weren't the picture-perfect couple that society magazines made them out to be. Joe was always busy. Work followed him home, phone calls into the late hours, weekend meetings, constant travel. There were also rumors that behind his polished veneer, he was controlling, sometimes cold, and seldom showed the warmth one might expect in a loving marriage. But from the outside, they looked unstoppable. With Charlotte's knack for style and Joe's business acumen, they quickly became the philanthropic it couple for events, dinners, and fundraisers. Their story was that of a modern fairy tale, but every fairy tale has its hidden shadows. After they were married, Charlotte was immediately introduced into Joe's philanthropic network. The Chadwick name had funded hospitals, scholarship programs, and art museums for over half a century. Joseph's father, the late Warren Chadwick, had built not just a real estate empire, but also a reputation for giving back. It was his father's legacy that Joe was determined to uphold more to honor him than for genuine altruism, or so Charlotte suspected. Over time, these posh charity galas and black tie events began to take a toll on Charlotte. She was expected to mingle flawlessly, to host dinner parties, to decorate lavish penthouses for donor gatherings, sometimes with less than a week's notice. If anything went awry, Joe's disapproval was palpable. He never yelled or cursed. Instead, a cold glare or a silent drive home would leave Charlotte feeling like she was walking on eggshells. Despite her reservations, Charlotte quietly endured the demands. Part of her believed that once the frantic pace of their new life settled, Joe would open his heart to her. She had, after all, married him out of a combination of love, admiration, and the desire to make him proud. Behind closed doors, Joe occasionally showed tenderness, praising her event coordination, patting her on the shoulder for a job well done, or gifting her with an elegant necklace after a successful fundraiser. These moments of warmth were fleeting, but enough to keep Charlotte hopeful. It was at one such fundraiser, an event supporting foster care initiatives in Manhattan, that Charlotte first met Georgina Frost, an up-and-coming socialite with a trust fund rumored to hail from a flamboyant Texas oil dynasty. Georgina was tall, raven-haired, and wore sky-high stilettos that seemed more appropriate for a runway than a philanthropic soiree. She caught Joe's eye from across the room. Initially, Charlotte thought nothing of it. Joe was a people person and had to maintain pleasantries with big donors or their heirs. But over time, small rumors began to swirl. Friends in Charlotte's circle mentioned seeing Joe and Georgina in the same corner of the same exclusive lounge on multiple occasions once without Charlotte. The staff at the Chadwick Foundation claimed that Georgina had become an active volunteer, working late nights at the office, often coinciding with Joe's schedule. Charlotte tried to quell her suspicions, reminding herself that Georgina was involved in philanthropic endeavors, much like everyone else in that circle. But the body language at dinners, Georgina leaning just a little too close to Joe, her laughter a bit too loud at Joe's jokes, made Charlotte's blood run cold. She confided in a single close friend, Naomi Jenkins, who had known Charlotte since college. Naomi was a lawyer who had seen enough marital disputes to sense red flags from a mile away. "Don't ignore your instincts," Naomi warned over an afternoon tea in Charlotte's penthouse. "If he's stepping out, you need evidence. You need to be prepared." Charlotte resisted refusing to believe it could be that dire. She still wanted to trust her husband, and so ignoring the twinges of doubt, she put on a smile at each event, even if it grew more and more forced each time Georgina flitted into the room. Charlotte's world tilted on its axis one crisp autumn morning when she discovered she was pregnant. The morning sickness, the exhaustion, she chalked it up to stress from event planning until a quick pharmacy test changed her life. After a second test confirmed it, she decided to announce the news to Joe in a special way. She arranged candles and a small display of baby shoes in their living room, hoping to catch him in a rare moment of repose. Joe's reaction was subdued. He offered a polite smile, said something about surprising timing, and then asked if they should visit the doctor right away. Charlotte felt her heart sink. She had expected an embrace, tears of joy, or at least a kiss. Instead, she received logistical questions, as if he were preparing for a business merger instead of fatherhood. Still, Charlotte's joy was undiminished. She vowed to keep a positive spirit, hoping the baby would bridge the emotional gap forming between them. Maybe she thought fatherhood would awaken in Joe the warmth he rarely displayed. True to form, Joe did schedule all the necessary doctor's appointments. He accompanied Charlotte, asked questions about vitamins and her diet, and even insisted on hiring a private chef to ensure she got the right nutrients. It appeared caring on the surface, but Charlotte couldn't shake the feeling that it was all too methodical, like ticking items off a checklist. He rarely asked how she felt about the changes in her body, her hopes or her fears. Late one evening, Charlotte was in bed, reading pregnancy articles on her tablet, when she heard Joe's voice drift in from the hallway. He was on the phone. She strained her ears. "Don't worry," he said in a hushed tone. "We'll talk tomorrow in the office." The voice he used was soft, almost affectionate. Though he didn't mention a name, Charlotte's heart pounded with dread. She chose not to confront him. An inner voice told her the truth would come out on its own. Sometimes illusions are easier to maintain than a painful reality. It was around Charlotte's second trimester when Georgina's presence became impossible to ignore. She was everywhere in the tabloids, on social media, often photographed attending society events without Charlotte in sight. A mutual acquaintance mentioned that Georgina was named a special advisor to the Chadwick Foundation's new initiative on sustainable housing. Charlotte had never heard of such a role. More suspiciously, Georgina and Joe were spotted outside a boutique hotel just having coffee, according to the gossip columns. The strain of it all caused Charlotte's eyes to well with tears at unpredictable moments. Still, she clung to a semblance of dignity and told herself Georgina was just another social climber who latched on to wealthy men for attention. Joe assured Charlotte that Georgina's father, Randolph Frost, was a significant donor, and Georgina's input was part of a broader philanthropic partnership. Charlotte, desperate to maintain her marriage and protect her unborn child, tried to believe him, but that gnawing sense of betrayal never left her. Throughout her pregnancy, Charlotte began noticing subtle changes in Joe. He started coming home even later, often with vague excuses. Weekend getaways or dinners that he claimed were work-related suddenly multiplied. Meanwhile, Charlotte was left feeling isolated, filling her time with prenatal yoga reading about baby care and meticulously designing the nursery in their sprawling penthouse. On her own, Charlotte decided to investigate. She rummaged through Joe's study one afternoon and found a receipt for an expensive bracelet from Tiffany & Co., dated around Valentine's Day. She never received any such gift. Later, she discovered a key card for a suite at the Park Hyatt. Panic fluttered in her chest as she realized the suite's date correlated with one of Joe's supposed business conferences. Grief-stricken and uncertain, Charlotte confronted him that evening. Joe looked at her calmly and asserted it was a misunderstanding. The bracelet had been for a loyal donor, an older woman he was trying to impress for a major foundation grant. The suite, he claimed, was for a visiting business associate. Charlotte knew the explanation was flimsy, but she lacked proof to refute him outright. Weary and heartbroken, Charlotte turned again to her old friend Naomi for counsel. They met in Naomi's law office away from prying eyes and the gilded walls of the Chadwick penthouse. Naomi was blunt. "You need to protect yourself and your child. If he's cheating, you need a contingency plan." Naomi laid out a scenario in which Charlotte would gather solid evidence of Joe's affair. If Charlotte could prove adultery, she would have a stronger position in any potential divorce settlement, especially crucial if she wanted to secure her child's future. But Charlotte balked at the idea of a divorce. "I'm pregnant," she said, tears brimming. "I can't just give up." Naomi took her hand. "Sometimes letting go is the strongest thing you can do," she said. "Just be prepared." A few weeks later, Charlotte received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. A woman's voice, trembling, identified herself as Beverly Chen, an administrative assistant at the Chadwick Foundation. Beverly was hesitant to reveal anything at first, but she insisted she had vital information for Charlotte. They agreed to meet in a discreet cafe on the Lower East Side, far from the usual upscale Manhattan spots. Over a cup of chamomile tea, Beverly confessed she'd seen suspicious emails between Joe and Georgina, filled with personal sentiments and allusions to weekends away. She had overheard phone calls where Georgina referred to Charlotte as the clueless wife, and most nauseatingly, Georgina would frequently say, "I can't wait until the baby is born, so we can ship it off to a nanny and have our fun." Beverly's eyes brimmed with tears, as if she couldn't bear to keep the secret any longer. "I know what it's like to be ignored," Beverly whispered. "I couldn't watch you suffer without at least telling you the truth." Charlotte clutched her teacup, heart pounding with a mix of fury and heartbreak. This was no longer speculation. Joe was having an affair, and Georgina was mocking Charlotte, even ridiculing her unborn child. Armed with Beverly's revelations, Charlotte felt her resolve harden like steel. She was not the naive interior designer from Boston anymore, nor was she the docile wife who blindly followed her husband to every social event. She was a mother determined to protect her child. Charlotte decided to hire a private investigator, a recommendation that Naomi had made months ago. The investigator, a composed woman named Ellen Price, specialized in high-profile cases with absolute discretion. Within days, Ellen confirmed what Charlotte already suspected. Joe and Georgina were renting a lavish condominium on the outskirts of Soho for their clandestine meetings. Ellen provided dates, times, photographs, and even recorded phone calls, enough evidence to shatter Charlotte's heart into 1,000 jagged pieces. But amidst the tears, Charlotte felt a strange sense of liberation. She no longer had to pretend. She had facts and the means to protect herself and her unborn child. The next step was to figure out how and when to confront Joe. More importantly, she had to do it in a way that would leave no room for him to manipulate her or tarnish her reputation. She needed to do it publicly, where Joe's carefully curated persona would work against him. As fate would have it, the Chadwick Foundation's annual holiday charity gala was just weeks away. This event was always a star-studded affair, with guests from the upper echelons of business, politics, and entertainment. The press coverage was immense. Cameras rolled from the moment guests stepped out of their limousines onto the red carpet. Charlotte typically dreaded such gatherings, but this year she saw it as an opportunity. She reached out to Naomi and quietly set a plan in motion. If Joe was going to flaunt his mistress in public, even if only through subtle gestures, then Charlotte would ensure the entire world saw the truth. And if Georgina dared mock her at this event, pregnant belly, and all, Charlotte wanted the power to strike back in the most controlled, strategic way possible. Over the next few days, Charlotte worked tirelessly behind the scenes. She arranged with Naomi's legal firm to have the divorce papers finalized, citing Joe's affair as the grounds. She prepared a separate envelope containing the damning evidence, photographs, transcripts, receipts, all of it. The crowning detail was the place and manner in which Joe would be served under the brightest spotlight of them all. On the night of the holiday charity gala, the ballroom of the Waldorf Grand was transformed into a winter wonderland. Glittering icicle lights hung from the ceiling, elegant ice sculptures adorned the reception area, and white floral arrangements lined the tables. Guests arrived in tuxedos and evening gowns, smiling for the paparazzi. Charlotte, now nearly 6 months pregnant, wore a custom midnight blue dress that accentuated her growing belly with dignified elegance. She arrived alone. Meanwhile, Joe arrived in a separate limousine with Georgina. Though they did not walk the red carpet together, Joe was still cautious. The insiders knew they were a couple. Georgina wore a gleaming silver gown, cut low at the back, turning heads with each step. If there was any doubt about her sense of triumph, it was erased by the smug smile she gave to the cameras, as if relishing her moment in the limelight. Charlotte remained composed, greeting old acquaintances and donors with practiced poise. She could feel Georgina's eyes on her from across the ballroom, but she refused to acknowledge it. She had a mission, and the night had only just begun. As the evening's program commenced, Joe went on stage to deliver a welcome speech on behalf of the Chadwick Foundation. He thanked the donors, praised the volunteers, and announced a new expansion project for affordable housing. No doubt something Georgina had a hand in orchestrating. He showed his usual calm confidence, drawing polite applause from the crowd. The tension in the air was palpable. Charlotte sat at a front table, her shoulders back, chin high. Georgina, unabashed, positioned herself just 2 seats away from Charlotte. During a brief intermission, Georgina sauntered over, a glass of champagne in hand. Lowering her voice so only Charlotte could hear, she sneered, You really shouldn't be drinking anything but water in your condition, dear. Or is that baby your only claim to the Chadwick name now? Charlotte's chest tightened, but she remained outwardly calm. I'm perfectly fine, she replied softly. And so is my child. Georgina gave a dismissive laugh. We'll see how long that lasts. With that, she strode away, leaving Charlotte seething. But Charlotte wouldn't rise to the bait. She had bigger plans. The show truly started when Georgina took the stage as the newly appointed Director of Donor Relations to introduce a musical performance. Flanked by a string quartet, Georgina spoke into the microphone about the Foundation's philanthropic spirit, throwing in pointed jabs at traditional families who face challenges they may not be ready for, drawing side eyes from those who suspected what she was implying. The crowd, a mix of oblivious socialites and keen observers, exchanged murmurs. Some saw through Georgina's facade. Others thought she was merely alluding to general philanthropic issues. But for Charlotte, each word felt like a knife. Her cheeks burned, her heart raced. She could see Joe on the sidelines, arms crossed, looking vaguely amused. Or was it nervousness? The mistress was mocking the pregnant wife in front of everyone, acting as if she had some moral high ground. Little did Georgina know, Charlotte had one final scene to stage. After Georgina's speech, guests began to mingle again. High-profile donors approached Joe to discuss potential partnerships, while Georgina basked in her 15 minutes of fame. Charlotte's hand drifted to her belly, and she steeled herself for what was coming next. Naomi, seated discreetly at a table near the back, made eye contact with Charlotte and nodded. The moment had arrived. The Master of Ceremonies announced a special segment, a surprise presentation by Charlotte Rivers Chadwick. People applauded politely, curious. Charlotte made her way onto the stage, microphone in hand. Spotlights illuminated her, revealing the slight tremor in her posture, but her voice when she spoke was clear and unwavering. She began by thanking the donors and expressing her gratitude for the philanthropic legacy of the Chadwick family. Her words carried a sincerity that contrasted sharply with Georgina's smug monologue. Then, with a calm that belied the turmoil in her heart, Charlotte took a steady breath. I would like to invite my husband, Joseph Chadwick, on stage for a brief announcement. The crowd clapped, and Joe approached his face carefully, neutral. Georgina stood in the shadows, arms folded, lips pressed into a thin line. She had no idea what was coming. As Joe joined Charlotte under the lights, she gave a poised smile. Joseph, for the past few months, we have supported each other through various philanthropic endeavors. At least that's how it may have appeared. The crowd fell silent, sensing tension. The cameras were rolling, capturing every moment. Charlotte continued. But tonight I must speak a truth that weighs heavily on me. I stand here not just as your wife, but as the mother of your unborn child. And while I believed we were building a future together, it appears there's another story, one that involves betrayal, secrecy, and dishonor. The audience stirred. Some gasped. Some looked at one another, unsure how to react. In the corner, Georgina turned pale, her confidence wavering. Charlotte drew out a manila envelope and held it up. I regret to inform you and all of our esteemed guests that I have no choice but to file for divorce. She handed the envelope to Joe, who stood frozen, shock flickering across his features. Murmurs rippled through the crowd like an impending storm. This envelope contains documented proof of Joseph Chadwick's affair with Georgina Frost, Charlotte declared. At the mention of Georgina's name, the cameras whipped to her direction, capturing her look of horror. There are photographs, receipts, and statements that I'm sure will thoroughly explain why I've reached this decision. A collective gasp filled the ballroom. Joe's jaw clenched. Georgina looked as if she might faint. Only Charlotte stood firm, tears in her eyes, but determination in her voice. "I will not be mocked or humiliated," she concluded. "And I will not allow my child to grow up in a home built on lies. This ends now." Pandemonium erupted. Some onlookers tried to stifle their shock, while others whispered with glee. A few cameras remained trained on Georgina, who rushed forward and grabbed Joe's arm, her face contorted with anger. "You said you would handle this," she hissed loud enough for the nearest microphones to catch. Joe, visibly flustered, attempted to regain composure. "Everyone, please. This is a misunderstanding," he began, but Charlotte turned to him with a fierce gaze. "There is no misunderstanding," she said. "Not when there are hotel receipts, email correspondences, and pictures. If you want to lie, do it in court." Security personnel hovered around the stage, unsure whether to intervene. Joe signaled them to stand down, but Georgina, in a desperate attempt to save face, grabbed the microphone. "This is all slander," she shrieked, eyes blazing. "You're just a jealous, hormonal woman who can't satisfy." She never finished her sentence. The microphone cut out courtesy of the quick-thinking sound crew, leaving the remainder of her tirade unheard by the public. At that moment, Charlotte felt the baby kick as if lending support from within. She closed her eyes briefly, inhaled the cold air of the ballroom, and slowly descended the stage. The final image captured by the news cameras was of Charlotte holding her belly, walking with unshakable grace, while Joe and Georgina were left on stage in the throes of a very public debacle. By the end of the evening, the gala was overshadowed by one headline: "Pregnant wife publicly serves divorce papers to millionaire Joseph Chadwick." Amid affair allegations. Social media lit up. Tabloids had a field day. Paparazzi swarmed outside the Waldorf Grand, clamoring for a picture or a statement. Charlotte escorted by. Naomi slipped into a waiting car and sped off, leaving the chaos behind her. Inside the limousine, Charlotte trembled. The emotional toll of that public confrontation weighed on her heavily. Naomi rubbed her shoulders. "You did what you had to do. Now let the lawyers handle the rest." Joseph attempted to call Charlotte repeatedly that night, but she ignored his calls. Georgina, too, was apparently sending messages, though Charlotte wouldn't stoop to read them. For the first time in months, Charlotte felt a strange sense of liberation. She was free from the charade, free from the lies. Even though her future was uncertain, she was no longer trapped in a loveless marriage ruled by deceit. By dawn the next day, every major news outlet and gossip website featured Charlotte's dramatic stand at the gala. Hashtags like #Chadwick Scandal and #Mistress Mockery trended on Twitter. In an unexpected turn, the public largely sympathized with Charlotte. People admired her courage, especially given her pregnancy. Some news analysts who once adored Joe as a generous philanthropist slammed him for his duplicity. Georgina's social media accounts were bombarded with negative comments, calling her a home wrecker, and worse, even celebrities weighed in. Talk show host Wendy Williams, never one to hold back, commented, "If you're bold enough to flaunt an affair, be bold enough to handle the fallout." Meanwhile, philanthropic circles quietly distanced themselves from Georgina. Rumors swirled that her father, Randolph Frost, was furious over her reckless behavior, fearing it might tarnish the family name. The morning after, Joe appeared at Charlotte's penthouse, unannounced, demanding to talk. The doorman tried to stop him, but Joe pressed forward. Charlotte, wearing a loose-fitting robe cradling her baby bump, met him in the living room. Naomi was present as well, arms folded, ready to intervene if needed. Joe's eyes were bloodshot, his hair disheveled. "You ambushed me," he spat, voice quivering with rage. "At a charity event in front of everyone. You humiliated me." Charlotte set her jaw. "I told the truth," she replied, voice steady. "You humiliated yourself the moment you took Georgina to bed." He raked a hand through his hair, pacing. "We could have handled this privately. The donors are in an uproar. The board is calling for my resignation." "Consequences of your actions," Charlotte interjected. "I owe you no sympathy." Joe attempted to shift tactics, pleading with her to reconsider. He promised to end the affair, to be a proper father to their child. But each word fell flat. Charlotte stared at him, tears swimming in her eyes, remembering the months of suspicion, the late-night calls, the hateful mockery from Georgina. She shook her head. "I'm done," she said. "If you truly want to be a father, you'll do so under the terms I dictate through my legal counsel." With that final statement, Charlotte walked away, leaving Joe in stunned silence. Naomi followed him to the door, escorting him out. Once he was gone, Charlotte retreated to her bedroom and allowed herself a moment to break down. The tears flowed in torrents. She grieved for the marriage she thought she had, the love she had once believed could grow, and the father her child might never truly know. Yet beneath the heartbreak burned a steadfast determination. Charlotte swore she would protect her baby from any future manipulations. If Joe wanted to be involved, it would be on her terms, not his. And as for Georgina, Charlotte's hopes were that Joe would one day realize the difference between a fleeting affair and real companionship, though Charlotte no longer cared to witness that lesson unfold. Over the next few weeks, Naomi and her team tirelessly negotiated the divorce terms. Joe initially resisted refusing to settle with the full demands Charlotte proposed, particularly her request for sole physical custody. He insisted he wanted equal rights to the child, claiming that the baby was as much his as hers. Charlotte's legal team argued that his unstable behavior and proven infidelity were grounds to limit his parental involvement until he showed genuine responsibility. Meanwhile, Georgina vanished from the social scene. Rumors circulated that her father had cut off her allowance and scolded her for bringing such disgrace to the family name. Some said she was hiding out in Europe, others that she was staying at an upscale clinic in California, dealing with emotional stress. Charlotte paid no attention. Georgina's fate was no longer relevant to her life. The winter months were especially cold that year. The swirling snow outside matched the swirling uncertainties in Charlotte's life. Despite all the turmoil, she found solace in preparing for her baby's arrival. She busied herself with setting up the nursery, folding tiny clothes, researching strollers, and reading parenting books. Each little act reminded her that there was hope, there was joy to be found in the new life forming inside her. She also began returning to her roots in interior design, taking on small projects for close friends. It was a way to reinvigorate her creativity and reclaim a piece of her old self, the Charlotte who had her own aspirations and wasn't defined by the Chadwick name. Occasionally, she would wonder if she had done the right thing by going so public with the divorce. Yet every time doubt crept in, she remembered Georgina's sneer and Joe's cold indifference. The truth needed to be exposed. In a bid to salvage his reputation and the Chadwick Foundation's donor base, Joe scheduled a press conference at the Foundation's headquarters. He read a prepared statement in which he apologized to anyone who was hurt by my personal decisions, and he specifically mentioned regret for his failures as a husband. Publicly, he pledged to continue serving as a board member, but stated he would step back from his day-to-day leadership role, citing personal reasons. The apology garnered mixed reactions. Some lauded him for owning up to his mistake. Others scorned him for not doing so sooner. Charlotte watched a snippet on the morning news. She noted how carefully crafted his words were. Not once did he mention Georgina by name, nor did he address the baby directly. She found it lacking sincerity. But at least the public pressure had forced him to acknowledge wrongdoing, a small victory in Charlotte's eyes. As Charlotte advanced into her 7th month of pregnancy, her emotional states oscillated wildly. She was elated at every kick and movement from her unborn child, yet nights were often sleepless, filled with anxiety about the future. Would she be enough for her baby? Could she provide the love and stability required all on her own? She had resources, yes, but money was never a substitute for emotional support. Sometimes thoughts of Joe haunted her dreams. She recalled the early days of their relationship dinner dates, walks along the Hudson laughter at random jokes. She wondered if she had romanticized their union, or if there had been genuine affection that both of them simply failed to nurture. Even so, she recognized that those fleeting good memories did not excuse the betrayal. The man who had once brought her roses had also shattered her trust. Loneliness became Charlotte's constant companion, so she took Naomi's suggestion and joined a prenatal support group. Meeting once a week, she sat in a circle of expectant mothers who shared their own stories, some unwed, some in rocky marriages, others blissfully happy. Oddly, it comforted her to hear other women's struggles. She realized that heartbreak could strike anyone, regardless of social standing. Over cups of herbal tea, she made new friends who reminded her that pregnancy, while challenging, was also a transformative journey. One of them, a soft-spoken musician named Felicity, was also estranged from her partner. The two bonded over their shared fears and hopes, forging a new sisterhood that transcended wealth or status. With every meeting, Charlotte felt her wounds begin to mend, her self-confidence inching back. One evening, as she dozed on the couch, Charlotte heard a knock at the door. Cautiously, she opened it to find Joe standing there, holding a small stuffed bear. She almost closed the door in his face, but curiosity held her in place. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. Against her better judgment, she nodded. He stepped inside, looking around the penthouse as if it had grown unfamiliar. In a halting voice, he said he wanted to talk about co-parenting, to figure out a schedule and support system that wouldn't stress Charlotte out. Charlotte listened carefully. For the first time, Joe showed genuine concern for the baby's well-being, rather than the optics of the situation. He expressed how he regretted his actions, though he stopped short of fully acknowledging the damage. Still, it was the closest thing to real remorse Charlotte had heard from him. She agreed to let him attend the final ultrasound appointment, but she made it clear that this changed nothing about the divorce proceedings. Joe left after half an hour, leaving the stuffed bear on the coffee table, a small, possibly sincere gesture. At the ultrasound session, Joe joined Charlotte in the exam room. Awkward silence stretched between them until the technician began the scan. The rhythmic thump of the baby's heartbeat filled the room. The screen flickered, revealing the outline of a tiny face. Charlotte felt tears spill onto her cheeks. Joe, too, looked visibly moved, his eyes misting over. For one fragile moment, they were simply two people witnessing the miracle of new life. The swirl of legal battles, infidelity and heartbreak receded into the background. When the technician handed them the printed ultrasound images, Joe gently touched Charlotte's hand. She didn't pull away. It was a flicker of unity, a reminder that despite everything they shared a child. Leaving the clinic, Joe offered to drive Charlotte home. She hesitated, then agreed. The ride was silent, but not tense. It was as if they both realized this was a pivotal moment. How they handled co-parenting would shape the baby's life forever. In the weeks that followed, Joe's lawyers reached out with revised divorce terms. Joe conceded to a hefty financial settlement and a structured visitation schedule, acknowledging Charlotte's right to full physical custody initially. A joint therapy session was proposed specifically geared toward co-parenting strategies. Although Charlotte was hesitant, Naomi advised her it could be beneficial for setting healthy boundaries. They attended their first session in a discreet therapist's office, far from paparazzi. Emotions ran high. Charlotte vented her sense of betrayal. Joe expressed guilt over letting their marriage deteriorate. While no miracles happened overnight, they began to see each other not just as adversaries in a legal war, but as the mother and father of a soon-to-be-born child who deserved stability and love. On a snowy morning in late March, Charlotte went into labor. The contractions struck like rolling thunder, sending her rushing to the hospital with Naomi by her side. Joe arrived an hour later. Breathless anxiety etched across his features. Despite the tension between them, Charlotte allowed him in the delivery room, knowing that this moment transcended their broken relationship. After a grueling labor, a piercing cry announced the arrival of a baby girl. The medical staff placed the infant in Charlotte's arms. Through tears of exhaustion and joy, Charlotte gazed at her daughter. Tiny fingers grasping the air, eyes tightly shut. Joe stood beside her, wiping tears from his own cheeks, carefully placing a hand on the baby's head. In that instant, the bitterness of the past year melted away, replaced by awe for the life they had created together. While they were no longer husband and wife, they had forged an unbreakable bond as parents. Once news of the baby's birth leaked, tabloids clamored for details. Speculations about the child's name weight and Joe's involvement ran rampant. Charlotte remained tight-lipped. She refused to give interviews, valuing her newborn's privacy above all else. Joe, too, stayed silent, only releasing a brief statement through his lawyers. We are grateful for a healthy delivery and respectfully request privacy as we focus on our daughter's well-being. Georgina was conspicuously absent from the narrative. No statements, no social media posts. It seemed she had retreated, completely cast out by high society circles that once welcomed her. In a world where reputation meant everything, Georgina had burned too many bridges. Whether she felt remorse or shame, no one could say. As Charlotte recovered in the hospital, Joe visited daily to see the baby. The tension that once choked their every interaction was replaced by a measured civility. They talked about feeding schedules, diaper brands, and doctor appointments. Occasionally, laughter would break through a soft reminder of simpler times. Charlotte began to realize that while she would always feel the sting of betrayal, the love she had for her daughter overshadowed the pain. She chose to focus on the present diaper changes, lullabies, and precious quiet moments. Joe, for his part, seemed genuinely committed to fatherhood. It didn't erase his past wrongdoing, but it was a step toward being there for his child. Months passed. Charlotte embraced motherhood with a fierce devotion. She also resumed taking more interior design clients, balancing her time between caring for her daughter, whom she named Isabella, and cultivating her re-emerging career. She moved out of the penthouse, purchasing a cozy townhouse in the West Village. Though smaller, it was entirely her own, a testament to her independence. Friends marveled at how she juggled single motherhood and a busy schedule. Charlotte, though, found a strength within herself she never knew existed. The heartbreak from Joe's affair and the public spectacle of the divorce had forged her into a stronger woman. She cherished the quiet evenings rocking Isabella to sleep, finding in those tender moments a sense of fulfillment she had long craved. On weekends, Joe took Isabella to the park or on short visits to his own residence. The arrangement went smoothly, thanks in large part to the therapy sessions and the clearly defined legal agreement. Charlotte sometimes felt pangs of sadness, seeing Joe cradle Isabella memories of what could have been drifting through her mind. But she resolved to keep the peace for Isabella's sake. Over time, they found a rhythm. While Joe remained somewhat distant emotionally, his love for Isabella was evident. He kept a nursery in his own home, stocked with everything she might need. Gradually, Charlotte softened, recognizing that fatherhood had opened a corner of Joe's heart she had never fully seen. Though the damage to their marriage was irreparable, the gift of a child offered them both a chance to cultivate a different kind of family dynamic, respectful, if not affectionate. Occasionally, Charlotte would hear rumors about Georgina's whereabouts. One tidbit placed her in a luxury rehab facility in Malibu, dealing with reported exhaustion and mental health issues. Another gossip column suggested she was attempting to write a tell-all book about her experiences with high-profile men. Charlotte rarely paid such rumors any mind. She had won her own battle, her dignity and her child's future were secure. One day, Charlotte stumbled upon an old photograph from the ill-fated gala, capturing Georgina mid-sneer as she directed a mocking jibe at Charlotte's pregnant form. For a moment, Charlotte felt anger resurfacing. Then she looked down at Isabella, peacefully napping in her bassinet, and let out a quiet sigh. Georgina was a relic of the past, a symbol of betrayal. Charlotte had moved on, had grown, and ultimately triumphed. No further vengeance or bitterness was necessary. Life took on a semblance of normalcy. Charlotte's business thrived as her designs caught the eye of affluent clients seeking tasteful, understated luxury. She also began a YouTube channel showcasing home design tips and do-it-yourself ideas for mothers on a budget wanting to break the myth that style was only for the wealthy. Her authenticity and expertise quickly garnered a loyal following. Isabella grew rapidly, babbling her first words and taking tentative steps across the living room floor. Each milestone brought Charlotte an indescribable joy. She documented these moments in a private scrapbook, a cherished keepsake of their mother-daughter journey. Some nights, she would gently place Isabella in her crib, recalling the day she stood before the world at a charity gala, pregnant and humiliated, but ultimately triumphant. It felt like a lifetime ago. Nearly a year after the gala, Charlotte found herself at a charity function, this time for a pediatric hospital wing funded by the Chadwick Foundation. She had been invited due to her design contributions for the children's play area. While she initially hesitated, she decided to attend. She wanted to show that she bore no ill will toward philanthropic causes themselves, and also to demonstrate her resilience. The event was smaller, more understated, focused on the patients and doctors rather than extravagant displays of wealth. Joe was there, cutting the ribbon with a local politician. He spotted Charlotte in the crowd and offered a small smile, a nod of recognition. She nodded back. The cameras didn't swarm them this time. The tabloids had moved on to fresher scandals. After the ceremony, Joe approached her to thank her for her design work. Their conversation was brief but respectful, a far cry from the explosive confrontation a year earlier. That evening, as Charlotte returned home, she reflected on how much had changed. She was no longer the timid wife overshadowed by her husband's ambitions. She was a mother, a professional, and a woman who had reclaimed her identity. She had faced betrayal and public humiliation, but emerged stronger, with her self-worth intact. Joe, in his own way, seemed to be on a path of self-reflection. Whether that led to genuine personal growth or just another layer of pretense, Charlotte couldn't say. She found she no longer needed that answer. Her life's anchor was now Isabella, and nothing could undermine the happiness she cultivated for them both. The world. Charlotte had known the one of red carpets, whispered betrayals, and staged smiles was behind her now, and in its place stood something simpler, softer, and far more real. It began with curiosity, not commitment. Months after the birth of Isabella and the public unraveling of her marriage, Charlotte found herself ready to smile again. Not performatively, not politely, but truly. Her days were filled with lullabies, morning sunlight on the nursery walls, and client consultations that reignited her passion for design. Her townhouse, modest compared to the Chadwick penthouse, was filled with warmth, color, and the quiet hum of new beginnings. That's when she met Daniel. He wasn't part of the society circuit or the corporate elite. He was a freelance photojournalist who had spent years traveling through refugee camps, documenting stories that rarely made headlines. They met at a small gallery. Opening, Charlotte was consulting on the space's lighting layout. Daniel had 3 photographs in the exhibit. Their conversation began over a shared admiration for vintage Polaroid tones, and turned into coffee, then phone calls, then long walks pushing Isabella's stroller through the West Village. Charlotte was cautious. She told Daniel everything: the scandal, the divorce, the media circus. He didn't flinch. "Everyone's carrying a past," he said once. "I'm more interested in how people carry it than in the weight itself." That stayed with her. What drew her to Daniel wasn't grand gestures, it was his gentleness. He never tried to replace what she had lost, never pushed her to move faster than she was ready for. He respected her boundaries. And when he looked at Isabella, it was with genuine affection, not obligation. He brought her small trinkets from his travels, tiny carved animals, colorful scarves, a harmonica that made the baby giggle uncontrollably. Their relationship unfolded like a sunrise, slow, patient, illuminating 1 inch of sky at a time. One weekend, as Daniel and Charlotte picnicked in the park with Isabella gurgling on a blanket between them, Charlotte caught herself laughing, laughing. She looked over at Daniel, who was tossing breadcrumbs to nearby birds with one hand and bouncing Isabella with the other, and she felt it a quiet joy she hadn't known she missed. It wasn't just about romance. It was about safety, ease, a reminder that love didn't have to come wrapped in wealth or tied to legacy. It could bloom quietly, rooted in shared moments and mutual respect. Charlotte didn't know what the future held. She wasn't rushing to define it. But for the first time in a long while, she wasn't bracing for collapse. She was letting herself hope. And in that hope, her life began again. The morning sun filtered softly through the tall windows of Charlotte's townhouse, casting a golden hue across the nursery floor. The room was filled with gentle signs of life: a half-folded blanket, a picture book lying open beside a stuffed elephant, and in the crib, the gentle rise and fall of little Isabella's chest as she slept peacefully. Charlotte stood silently by the window, a cup of tea in her hand, her gaze not on the city below, but on the reflection in the glass of a woman she no longer fully recognized, yet had come to deeply respect. A year ago, her name had been splashed across headlines linked to a scandal that felt like the unraveling of everything she had built. Mistress mocked the pregnant wife at a charity gala. The millionaire was served divorce papers on stage. The world had watched, judged, speculated. For days, even weeks, her life wasn't hers. But now, as dawn wrapped around her like a soft shawl, she saw it differently. That night, painful and humiliating as it had become the moment she stopped shrinking and started standing. It had been her breaking point, but also her beginning. She turned from the window and walked to Isabella's crib, brushing a soft strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. The baby sighed in her sleep, curling slightly toward the warmth of her mother's touch. That simple gesture stirred something deep within Charlotte. It wasn't bitterness, it was clarity. She no longer thought of Georgina, the woman who had once sneered at her belly in public. Nor did she dwell on Joe's betrayal. Those memories had been processed, filed, and placed where they belonged in the past. Their presence no longer had the power to break her. What filled her now was something entirely new: peace, purpose, and the quiet thrill of a life reclaimed on her own terms. Her business was thriving. Her YouTube channel, once a hesitant idea born in the stillness of heartbreak, had found its voice. And more than anything, her home now echoed with love, laughter, and the steady rhythm of a mother and daughter learning the world together. Some might still call what happened to her a scandal. Others might forever link her name to a public takedown. But Charlotte knew better. It wasn't a scandal, it was a rebirth. She pressed a kiss to Isabella's forehead and whispered, "We made it." And in that simple truth, she found everything she ever needed to know. Thank you for joining me on this emotional roller coaster of love, betrayal, and ultimate triumph. Charlotte's story reminds us that even in the darkest moments, when a pregnant wife is mocked in front of high society and a millionaire husband's betrayal plays out on the biggest stage, courage can shine through. She transformed heartbreak into empowerment and emerged stronger than ever, not only for herself, but for her child's future. If this dramatic journey captivated you, please help the channel grow by liking this video, sharing it with fellow drama lovers, and subscribing for more real-life-inspired tales of resilience and intrigue. Your support enables us to keep bringing you stories that light up the screen and stir the soul. Until next time, remember, no matter how dark the night, a new dawn of hope is always just around the corner. Thank you, and see you in the next video.